Hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm very grateful that you've made the time and what I'm sure is a very busy schedule. I'm Christina Lovelock and I am the Director of Community at Heard Consulting. And we really take our role in the community very seriously at Heard. We want to create spaces to bring people together, to allow discussions, and it's really important to learn what business analysis looks like in different organisations, in different sectors, because we know it can really vary, and it's a great opportunity to learn from each other and discover what business analysis looks like in different settings. Now, we have done one of these previously. We did a session which focused on business analysis in higher education. Today, we are focusing on business analysis in central government, and I am absolutely delighted to join this panel of business analysis leaders. In a moment, I'm going to let them introduce themselves. I've got some questions for the panel, but I really hope that you will want to submit questions as well via the chat, and we'll get to as many of those as we possibly can during the time that we've got together. I can see lots of people putting good morning and saying who's here in the chat. Please continue to do that. It's lovely to see so many of you and have you here with us today. So I'm going to ask Ali to start us off with a short intro.
Hi everyone, my name is Alison Jurowski. I'm head of all business analysis at DWP Digital. I've been here since about the end of 2015, but not always as head of role. I previously worked in one other government department on a placement year at the MOD, but that was a very, very long time ago. And prior to this role, I've worked within business analysis, but in both banking and manufacturing sectors. That's me.
Thank you so much, Ali. Ian, over to you.
Morning, everybody. I'm Ian Tidmarsh. I'm Head of Profession for Business Analysis in Ministry of Justice. I've been in Ministry of Justice since, I believe, 2022. Previously to that, I was at DWP for about 20 years, not all as a BA. Did a lot of generalist roles and customer-facing roles, which massively helped with learning the BA ropes, I suppose.
Ian and Rosie.
Yeah, morning everyone. So I'm Rosie Lyons. I work as a lead business analyst at the Home Office. I've worked at the Home Office for around about 6.5 years now, and I actually started as an apprentice business analyst back in 2019. So yeah, lovely to meet you all.
We actually met then, Rosie, didn't we? You're apprentice, so it's amazing to see you on your career journey in government.
It's very strange, actually, Christina, because you interviewed me for my final interview for the endpoint assessment. So, yes, it's weird how we keep in touch, but lovely.
It's brilliant. I love it. So thank you, everyone, for your introductions. We are recording this session. It will be made available via our YouTube channel. And I'm also going to put in the chat a link to our LinkedIn and our newsletter if you'd like to stay in touch with us. So I'm going to kick off now with the first question. I'm going to come to you, Ali, again. Why do government departments need business analysts?
Good question. I guess because we're trying to build better services for our users. So it's really important that we carry out business analysis, which works alongside some of the other roles that we work directly with. So, for example, the user research. If you combine our analysis with that user research, you get some really powerful information, which helps the teams make the right decisions. So yeah, I think it's a really important role within government.
Rosie, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's super important that we recognise business analysis as a really valued profession in government, because it helps us ensure that our products and services really align to the business needs, the strategic goals of the organisation, and ultimately provide kind of efficient services for those who use our government services.
And government departments can be quite complicated, and as we said, government obviously has a lot of decisions to make, and business analysis can really help with that. Ian, anything that you want to expand on?
Yeah, I think government, there's so many layers of complexity and stakeholders and everything that goes in between to deliver any sort of change. And I think having a business analyst involved with that real inquisitive mindset can bring all of those various perspectives together and bring them back to the team or bring them back to the project, the product managers, and help deliver that change.
So building on that, Ian, is there anything that you find unique or particularly special about working in a government environment compared to other organisations or sectors that you've worked in?
I think one of the things that is unique about government, and I think it's something that maybe we take for granted sometimes and need to remind ourselves about, is a lot of our users don't have a choice, and that's quite a privileged position to be in, but it's quite a responsible position to be in. People don't have a choice to use our services, so we have to make sure that we're representing the broadest spectrum of users possible, and really making sure that we're at the cutting edge of problems, making sure that people aren't just getting stuck and bogged down by government.
That's a great point, and we kind of talk about citizens rather than customers, and we, things like competition and market share, they're not relevant. Those aren't the kind of things that business analysts are looking at in that setting. Ali, you mentioned some of the other environments that you've worked in. What have been your your observations about what's different?
Yeah, so some of the things that you've touched on there. So I previously worked in banking, so obviously a lot of that is around kind of bringing in customers, attracting new customers. I've previously worked for car manufacturers as well, so a lot of that was around building market sharing, getting into new markets. None of that kind of is applicable in government, but yet the skills that we have as BAs are very much the same. So differences in the organisation, absolutely, but the role itself, I don't think varies as much as people might think looking outwards or looking inwards at it.
But in some government departments, the practice of business analysis is very mature, and in others, it's new or non-existent. So how do you think that business analysis might continue to change or evolve in government? Rosie, I'll start with you.
Yeah, thanks, Christina. So I think for me, it's all about focusing on the investment into the training and development opportunities that are available, and kind of standardizing those offerings across the piece. So like I said at the start, I was an apprentice. We also have, other schemes that support business analysts, mentoring schemes, and kind of building that really strong community. I think is also very, very important. So not kind of having business analysis operating within silos, but actually kind of building that outwards community is super valuable as well.
That's a great point. Ali, I know you probably work with different leaders across different government departments. What do you notice about where business analysis is doing particularly well, or it's succeeding in a particular department?
I think I wouldn't necessarily say it's succeeding more in one department than another, but I think I've noticed over the time that I've been within government that we're starting to make progress in terms of all of the organisations understanding the role more and kind of seeing the value in it. I think when I first joined, there was quite a lot of, and that's possibly the way that our department was set up previously, it was seen as more of a generalist role, and trying to get that professionalism kind of brought into the role. We're definitely having a bit more success around that, and I think speaking to some of those other leaders across other government departments, that seems to be the same trend, that we're starting to make progress in that. Not that it's perfect, there's still work to be done, but definitely we are making headway in that respect.
And Ian, how do you think it might continue to evolve in different departments?
I think recognition by the centre of government within Cabinet Office and launching development schemes such as Tech Track and business analysis has been included as one of 4 most hard to fill and priority vacancies in government, alongside 3 engineering roles. Just kind of shows off how important business analysis is going to be, and making sure that the BA leaders within the organisations, within the departments, are championing and advocating for the BAs that are already there. People's skills need to continue to be put at the focus of change and changing themselves, rather than just constantly recruit new people with new skills, and the whole profession needs to be working together.
And I happened to see an advert last year, which was for a BA role specifically to support the House of Lords, which I thought was really interesting, that all different parts of government are really kind of understanding, exactly as you mentioned, Ali, that value, that need for business analysis in decision making, particularly around how we implement digital transformation within government, but in lots of different areas as well. So I want to ask a question now that's not specific to a government setting, but what challenges do you think BAs are facing at the moment? Rosie?
Yeah, thanks. So I think there's a variety of challenges. So the obvious one is kind of the rapidly changing tech landscape. So, the introduction of AI, the need for continuous learning. But I do think with that challenge comes opportunity. So it's about kind of how we leverage that technology and use it to our advantage. And also, I think a long-standing one is kind of managing stakeholder expectations and kind of working through those interactions. I feel like as BAs, we interact with a real broad range of people and personalities. So I think it's something that we need to continue to focus on and refine our skill set in that regard as well. So lots of challenge, but lots of opportunity as a result, I think.
Ali, what are you noticing, challenges that BAs are facing?
One, and I know it's not just unique to us, I know it's common across other areas, other organisations. I guess it's the emergence of other roles, which people can sometimes feel there's a little bit of overlap with the BA role, or there's a bit of kind of blurring of the edges. So some of the ones, for example, service design, some aspects of user research, there's a number of different roles, product as well, potentially. So we find people are sometimes a little bit, okay, where exactly does my role start and end? And that can cause confusion depending on the setups of the teams and who's involved. But yeah, sometimes it's personalities.
Ian, any other challenges you want to highlight?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges I think as well, and I've long felt this even when I was working at DWP as well, I think we do to ourselves in not recognising that our work as BAs in government is a specialist skill set. And we are quite often the longest serving member of a team. And with that comes a lot of knowledge. And because we have a lot of knowledge, we're often seen as a subject matter expert. And sometimes we lean into that a little bit too much. And we need to just lift our heads up a little bit more and start looking at where can we add value, maybe outside of the team, and bringing that back in. What Ali said before about some of the competition we have with other roles, that we forget sometimes the value we add and our knowledge gained from being long-serving members of a team or within a change.
Any issues that we've highlighted there around changes in the tech landscape, potentially the introduction of AI and the prevalence of other roles. Do you think the public sector context makes these challenges any better or any particularly worse? Ian, I'll start with you.
Sorry, Tina, could you repeat the question again?
Yeah, so given all those challenges that we've highlighted, do you think the public sector context makes those better or worse in any way, or about the same?
I don't have a direct experience of working in public sector, but I've recruited a lot of BAs who have joined us from public sector, and they're surprised at how similar, but also how difficult it is working in government. I think quite often it's portrayed as an easy place to work, but when you get here, it's really not. The layers of bureaucracy and change is enormous. So I don't think it's easier or necessarily harder. It's just very different.
Mm. And Ali, how does the context, do you think, contribute to some of those challenges that you highlighted?
I think particularly around the ones I mentioned around role overlap, I have found since moving to government that there have been more specialist roles than I personally found when I was in private sector. And that's possibly because our focus being kind of on citizens and users, there's a lot more focus on kind of the need to make sure that those services are accessible to people and they're easy to use. So quite a few of those roles I mentioned, including like content, service, etc. I found a lot more of those roles within government than I did previously in the private sector. That might not be everyone's experience, that's just my personal, but yeah. So that has contributed to kind of that feeling of, okay, there's so many other people out there I need to figure out how to work with and alongside.
Well, that relates really well to a question that we've got in the chat from Tegan, which is thinking about the government digital standard. What's your view or opinion on the BA role in this? Because there does seem to be a particular focus on design and research roles. So does that mean that there's space for the BA to operate in that area?
That for me again?
Yeah, if you want to start us off.
Yeah, so it is something I certainly noticed working on some of the teams, that there seems to be, certainly some of the assessments, very much a request to involve some of those other roles and not so much business analysts. I have challenged that a few times, and I guess kind of the reason behind it, or the rationale we're always given, is actually that the analysis is equally as important, but it feeds into the wider team, so that's represented by those members who do come along. So I don't think it's that it's not valued or not seen as important. It's maybe just the way it's sometimes phrased in terms of the roles who are invited to these assessments. But yeah, I don't see that as kind of a something that where we're not seen as important, or our analysis is not seen as important.
Rosie, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely right. I think there's sometimes a danger in service assessments I've been involved with, kind of touching on that earlier point about BAs sometimes being seen as a generalist role. I sometimes would find myself being asked to do things that I'm like, it's not really a BA role, that's just because nobody else is there to do it. So I feel like you need to be very clear about what value it is that you are bringing, and you're not overly compensating for, you know, other roles not being available at the time or what have you. So yeah, I think us being super clear on that is really, really important.
BAs, we're usually a kind of helpful lot, so we do find ourselves gap filling, sometimes even obfuscating that gaps do exist in project teams, because we're doing so many of those things that are kind of not really business analysis, but we know that they need to get done. So that's interesting. Thank you. Ian, anything that you wanted to share about the GDS and assessments and some of the other roles that we find ourselves working with?
Yeah, I think because a lot of what we do, we can turn our hand. I think it's already been said. We can turn our hand to many different roles across a product team. We do lose that skill of the BA needed for this thing. I think getting us involved in service standard assessments is massively important to be able to represent the business needs and also understand all of the other constraints that people are trying to build out from. And something we have done in the Ministry of Justice is get the BA embedded into that, and it's working really well. So I've got real confidence that we are in the right place, and we do get involved in the right things. We just need to see it happen across government.
That's great. That's a good news story. And there's a question which links back to a point that you made, Ian, that sometimes that we have people in our teams and departments who are transitioned into a BA role, sometimes because of the subject matter expertise that they have rather than their business analysis skills or background. How do you think that we can help and support people who have got that subject matter expertise transition from being an SME to a business analyst?
That's important, and it happens a lot. And I think a lot of us, if we're honest, that's how we ended up where we are. I think for me, the most important thing is to make sure that the person knows that just because they've been transitioned into a BA, it doesn't mean that they are a BA from day one. That they're there because of their knowledge, and they still need to develop their skills. And that's something we should be promoting to their teams as much as we do to the person. And we build a really strong development plan around them and give them the support, and we'll put them in BA environments where they can talk to people, they can understand and watch and observe other BAs. But the most important thing is that they don't think they're already a BA just because they've been told they're a BA.
That's a great point. And Ali, I know you've got some experience of that as well, where kind of people end up with the job title BA, but perhaps without the experience. How do you support those people?
Yeah, I think as Ian's kind of alluded to, it's that kind of making sure that they're not so reliant on one side of the skill set. So yes, you've got great business knowledge or great subject matter knowledge, but actually you really need to build up those technical skills or some of the other skills that we need as BAs. So to become that well-rounded BA, we need to make sure that we've got measures in place to be able to upskill them in some of those other areas, whether that's in their teams for more senior BAs or some of the training programs that we have. But it is important that, as we say, we're just not looking at that one side of them, otherwise they become very one-sided and rely purely on that business knowledge, which won't necessarily be there up to date forever. So yeah, making sure they're well-rounded is kind of the point.
Have you've noticed at all that kind of relationship between subject matter expertise and business analysis?
Sorry, I missed who that one's directed at.
Oh, Rosie.
Yeah, sorry, I lost. I don't know whether it was a bit of a connection issue. Could you just repeat that, please, for me?
Yeah. Have you noticed that issue where kind of people who've actually got subject matter expertise are being asked to do business analysis, and what have been your experiences there?
Yeah, definitely. It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I think sometimes that knowledge can be a bit of a hindrance as well as a help. So Yeah, it's just about making sure that people are really committed to that continuous professional development, and they are motivated to develop in that BA space, because sometimes you'll see people being put into a BA role or will be given the label of business analyst, and it's not something that they've got a real passion for or they understand. So then you kind of see that people kind of lean in more into that subject matter expertise to get through their day, as opposed to actually employing the business analysis skill set, which is so important. So I think you do need to have that kind of like passion and commitment to becoming a business analyst, and not just thinking, oh, I've got the title, so I'm suddenly there. I think that's really, really critical.
I think that's such a great point, that organisations do reorganise themselves, they make changes, they remove certain roles, they rebrand people. And that can be really upsetting for people. They find themselves with a job title that they maybe are not entirely happy with. It doesn't suit them. It doesn't suit their skill set. And I think as leaders, we have to be prepared to have those difficult conversations with people, saying, look, this is how it's all shaken out. This is where you've ended up. But is this what you want? Because we don't want to hold people captive in roles that aren't actually going to be fulfilling for them or in line with their career aspirations. Ian, you want to come in on that?
Yeah, just to extend that a little bit. In the recent Marty Kagan book, it's Transformation, he talks about a company, one of the case studies, where they need more product management focus, and Scott will be interested in this one. So rather than hiring the skills that they need, they repurposed or rebranded a team of business analysts to fulfill that role, but didn't get the outcome they were expecting, because just calling somebody something doesn't make them something. But we still seem to do it with business analysts. So it's really important that we've all recognised it, and I think we all need to just make sure that we're promoting that message out into our teams as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. Could you tell us the name of the book again, Ian? Somebody's asked in the chat.
Yeah.
If you could repeat that.
Scott, keep me honest on this, but I think it's Marty Kagan, Cagen, Marty Marty, and it's called Transformed. It's a series of 3 books that he's wrote. I'm listening to it at the moment because I don't have the attention span to read workbooks at the moment, so it's an audio book for me. It's interesting. It's talking about the shift from projects to products.
That's amazing. And Scott shared the link to that with us in the chat, so that's brilliant. Thank you, Scott. So I'm going to take a little bit of a turn to something that we touched on earlier, which is about AI. So are your teams starting to use AI at all to support them in their work? And are there any barriers or limitations about what you can do and what you're adopting? Rosie, I'll get you to start us off on that one.
Yeah, fabulous. So I think this is kind of the nature of government, but we're always a little bit behind the curve in terms of adopting new technology, you know, whether it's security reasons or compatibility with the estate. So we've only recently just got Copilot, like literally in the last month. That's like the revolutionary thing in the Home Office. And at first it was quite daunting, you know, in terms of whether it's going to replace the BA role and how is it going to work. But like I said earlier, it's all about those challenges becoming opportunities. So it's about how we can work with AI as a tool to support us and maybe take some of the heavy lifting off us, you know, help promote efficiency. So we've seen it being used in terms of like user stories, acceptance criteria. I work in the front door space, so, you know, enabling it to triage requests for the team and just get rid of that some sort of manual burden that's there. So I see it as like an extra member of the team as opposed to a threat that we shouldn't really go near because it might have an adverse effect. So yeah, we've just started to use that, but like I say, we're a little bit behind the times with the security implications. So
yes, interesting. Thank you. Ian, are your team starting to use AI at all?
I've been quite, I sound like a bit old-fashioned, but I'm a bit skeptical of it all still. I do see it as a very valuable tool, and I do promote it as a valuable tool as a productivity assistant. But I don't think we're using it in any anger of doing process with it or building artifact where we just kind of build it and ship it. I would like to think, and it's something I've spoken a little bit about, of using it to supplement your own work. And, you know, you've given it a load of notes. Can you produce a summary? As long as you're reading it and it makes sense, then great. You know, you can cover lots and lots more work more quickly then by all means do it.
Thank you. Ali, what are you noticing about the adoption or lack of adoption of AI in DWP?
Yeah, so I probably haven't got any specific examples of where we're using it within business analysis to kind of take on some of the work that we would do, but I know there's lots of kind of groups looking at it, lots of different roles and different areas are looking at it to see what the potential is and what we could use it for in the future. So again, we're using Copilot, and there's a bit of a trial going on there to see what the potential could be, but nothing sort of concrete as yet. So we're not kind of seeing it replacing people writing their user stories, or not as far as I know, but I certainly haven't seen any examples of that yet. But yeah, we are starting to look at the potential.
I want to go on to talk a little bit about recruitment, and I know, Ali, you do a lot of recruitment, and I just want to relate that to the AI issue. What are you noticing at the moment about AI in recruitment for BAs?
Noticing that a lot of people are using it, and possibly not in the way that we would really like them to use it. So I think we talked there a little about not using it to kind of produce something from scratch, but actually to maybe shape something or reformat something. That would be absolutely fine. But I think we are seeing a lot of similarities in applications for roles, because people are just using it as a write me a personal statement containing some of this. So unfortunately, it can be a bit of a hindrance in terms of the volumes of AI generated applications we believe we get. So yeah, that adds some complexity to what we do. We're still kind of figuring out the best ways to kind of combat that and work around it, but it's obviously there. It's not going to go away in the next few months, and I expect it's not just us that experience that. I know it's not just the BA role within DWP, it's much wider, so I'm imagining some of my fellow panel members will have experienced the same.
So Ian, what advice would you give someone who is considering applying for a civil service job as a business analyst? What hints or tips can you give them?
Don't just ask AI to do it. I don't want to give away all our trade secrets of how we try and catch you out. I think one of the big mistakes, not mistakes, but one of the misconceptions people have when they apply for a job in government is we'll take anybody, because we're government, we're not specialists, we're not very talented, we're not brilliant at what we do. It's very hard working here. We have a lot of highly skilled people, and some of our BAs are the best around, and we want you to put as much effort into your application as you would do applying for Amazon or Microsoft or Google, or someone really, really good, because we are really, really good. Really have a look at the advert you're applying for and speak to the recruiters, understand what vacancies are included. A BA role in government can be anything from a finance to a welfare to a health to a justice to legislation to everything the Home Office does. It's not just you're coming to do a BA role in a bank or in a technology company. We're a technology company, we're a bank, we're everything. So really understand what it is you're applying for and how your skills are best suited to that.
That's great advice, thank you. Rosie, any other advice that you give people going through that civil service jobs application process?
Yeah, I think for me, do not underestimate it. Like Ian was saying, don't think it's a breeze, because it's really not. You do have to put a lot of effort in. It's not about just kind of like submitting your CV and then just hoping for the best. A lot of job applications will ask you for a personal statement that's tailored to the essential criteria and including the desirable criteria. And when you're kind of on the other end sifting, like if that person has not hit those markers, their application will be rejected. So I think really paying attention to the essential criteria, desirable criteria, thinking about how your skills map to those and your experiences, and how you can frame those using that STAR method, so the situation, task, action, result, and kind of doing that throughout your application. Doing some research around the department that you're looking to apply into. There's lots of recruitment guidance available through the civil service website. So just kind of thoroughly doing your research and not thinking, oh, it's going to be easy because it's civil service, because it's actually really challenging to get it right.
I think I'm right in saying that all of the applications are being reviewed by humans. There's no AI initial sift going on, so it's not about getting keywords in there for an AI sifting tool to pick up on. It's an actual human person reading it, so make it as readable as possible.
I think people forget that sometimes. So the recruitment has like an initial sift. So if you've not hit any of the sort of key criteria, like right to work, and you've somehow got through, then they don't come through to the panel. But the process of actually sifting applications is manual. It's very painful. And I think when people forget that there is a human that is a business analyst reading that application, so you need to make it very impressive and make them feel like, yes, we want to meet this person. It's also worth noting it's all anonymous, so there's no kind of your name's on there or anything like that. It's all anonymous, so you really have to sell yourself through your writing.
That's a great point, thank you. Ellie, anything you want to mention given your experience with recruitment?
Yeah, I guess being government, we attract a lot of applications, so the volumes are extremely high. So everything that Rosie and Ian have said there around tailoring it and making sure that you really read what we've asked for, the criteria. You might put in the most impressive CV and work history in the world, but if you haven't actually touched on the things we've asked for, unfortunately, you'll never get through. So it's really kind of understanding that and making sure that you tailor it. And I guess as well, I would just say in general, think about why you're applying for a role in government. What is it that you actually want from a role? Because it might not be for everyone. Some people might find it frustrating working in government, or a different pace from working in private sector, or too vast. So actually think about that as well. Think about what you want from a role before just kind of putting in an application.
And I'm going to stick with you, Ali, because my next question is about developing talent pipelines for BAs. So how are you doing that at DWP?
So we've got a couple of ways that we're doing that at the moment. So we are on about our 5th intake of level 4 apprentices. So we've had really good success with apprenticeship in digital. Had some really good candidates through and good success rates, people moving on and progressing really well. So that has been really important for us. It's very structured. It helps teams bring in people who would otherwise maybe not think about the BA role and have that support. But we're conscious that volumes of BAs that we're trying to bring in, we want to encourage people who have maybe worked within other government departments or other roles who are thinking about the BA role and wondering about ways to get into it. So we bring in another level of BA who aren't on an apprenticeship but are learning much more on the job and through in-house training, and trying to encourage them to kind of develop the skills we need. We're having a lot of success with that as well. So those two approaches are really working well for us in terms of that kind of certainly the early to end of the spectrum.
Rosie, you said that you got into business analysis through that apprenticeship. What's your department doing now in terms of making sure that you've got those talent pipelines in place?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think from a personal perspective, the learning doesn't stop with the apprenticeship ending. So once I finished the apprenticeship, there was a lot more opportunities like the diploma, the international advanced diploma, and opportunities kind of branching into service design and other areas like that as well. So I think it's not just about kind of getting BAs into the organisation and then getting them to tick a box to say that they're qualified and then that's it. It's about that continuous professional development, and then those BAs kind of giving back and offering mentorship to newer BAs that are coming in, and it kind of works as a nice cycle. But yes, we've broadened out. We've got apprenticeship schemes, there are graduate schemes, there are schemes for transfer, so you can move from being kind of a product manager to a BA if you really wanted to. So there's lots of opportunity for that as well. So yeah, I think that's one of the things that I really like about working in the Home Office, is that commitment to professional development and supporting people.
It's amazing. And I'll say what I always say at this point when we're talking about apprenticeships and other entry-level roles for leaders and BAs who might be thinking about introducing them into their organisations, is that there is never a good time to start planning for the future and think about entry-level roles. You just have to start doing it. There's no point waiting and saying, you know, when we get to the end of this quarter or next year or whatever, you just have to start making it work. There's never a good time. It is a lot of effort, but it really makes a big difference to your organisation. Ian, you mentioned Tech Track earlier. What are some of the other talent pipelines that are going on in your area?
Yeah, so we've I'm going to say recently, certainly within the last 6 months, our first cohort of level 4 apprenticeships were successful in completing their apprenticeship, which is brilliant news, which we took a small cohort of existing prison officers and probation staff, and they went through an 18-month apprenticeship program to retrain in business analysis. And from day one, they were absolutely fantastic, and they're now fully embedded, recruited permanently into their product teams, and they're doing amazingly well. And it's great to see them progressing. What we're going to be doing over the next few months now is seeing how the tech track stuff goes. And then after summer, we're going to start looking at what our junior pipeline needs to look like. Once we finish this next round of recruitment we're doing now for senior and mid, we then will be looking in the summer of how do we make sure our pipeline is sustainable. Looking at junior, is it going to be junior recruitment, or is it going to be more of a hybrid mix of learning on the job?
Good luck with all of that as well. Now we've got a slightly controversial question here from Stu, which is civil service has a reputation for paying less than other industries. So what makes it worth being a business analyst in that environment? So I'm going to ask you two things. Do you accept the premise of the question? Does BA pay less in the civil service than it does elsewhere? And what are some of the benefits of working for the civil service? Ian, I'll let you lead off with this one.
Thank you. It's a question I hear a lot. If you're comparing business analysis to other industry, then I don't think it is too different. I think in a lot of cases we pay more attractively. I think once you're in the job, and I think Ali, we've said this in the past, we expect probably a little bit more, in some cases a lot more, of a business analyst than you may get elsewhere. But in return, the flexibility, the variation of work, you're not siloed into one product for the rest of your life. I think business analysis in government gives so many opportunities to learn different skills and working in different environments. I don't think you can put a price on that, but in terms of cash money, I don't think we're too different to private sector.
Pension's usually better.
Pension's amazing. I'm way off that, by the way.
Ali, anything you want to add to that?
I would say actually that for some of our entry-level roles, we pay much better than other organisations. So for somebody who's wanting to come in brand new without any of the BA experience, if you come in as either an apprentice or an associate business analyst, certainly in the levels we have, actually, I don't think you're going to find that kind of pay for an entry-level role anywhere else. So coming at that point, definitely. I mean, I guess it gets less kind of comparable maybe at some of the other levels, but actually I think the recruitment teams do benchmark against other industry all the time and kind of look at where we're at and whether we need to change anything. But in terms of like the other benefits, the pension, the flexibility, etc., you have to take into account all of those things, and which is the more important for you, I guess, is another aspect of applying for a job. What is the more important? Is it just the pure salary, or is it some of those other benefits? So yeah, I don't think it's true that we're terrible payers.
Great, thank you. Rosie, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, definitely, and I agree with everything that's been said. So I think the perception, I think I saw a comment in the sidebar from Tegan that it's hard to generalise because there is so much variety across the government sector, and I think that's absolutely true. So some government departments will pay a lot higher than others, so I don't think we can avoid that. But we do have kind of recruitment and retention allowance in a lot of departments, which kind of bumps your salary up. And if I'm being completely honest, when I've researched jobs in the private sector, I found that I would be worse off, not better off, than work kind of staying within the Home Office, which was really, really surprising to me because I had that kind of preconception in my head. But I think the real opportunity to kind of work on impactful projects, contribute to the lives of the public, kind of significant motivators for me, as well as the kind of flexible working. I think there was a question around that as well. So yes, we work very flexibly. So I think it is that balancing it up and not just kind of basing assumptions on a myth that might be based on 20, 30 years ago.
You mentioned the flexibility, Ali, you mentioned that as well. And we have had a couple of questions about level of hybrid working that happens within government. And also, do you need to live near a hub? How often do you have to go into the office, that kind of thing in your experience? Rosie?
So we do have a flexible working policy that came in formally after COVID. So it's currently 60%. So you work in the office 3 days a week and you're allowed to work from home 2 days a week. Different departments kind of flex that accordingly, because some people have like reasonable adjustments, which means they can work from home more often. And also, it's not necessarily over the week. It's an average over an agreed time period with your line manager. So you might say an average of 60% over 3 months. So 1 week you might need to travel, and that takes up a portion of that. So it's all about kind of an average, as opposed to tracking that you're in the office Monday to Wednesday, for example. And then in terms of kind of living near a hub, I find that the Home Office particularly are very accommodating to that. So when I started my role, there wasn't necessarily a BA community within Liverpool, which is the city that I'm closest to, but they were accommodating in saying that I could work there, and that kind of set the bar for them, going, do you know what, there's actually BAs over there that we didn't realise that we could tap into. And now we've got, you know, quite a number of BAs over there. So I think it's, yeah, I wouldn't say it's a barrier if you don't feel like you work near an office, or if a job advert is saying kind of Manchester, London. Don't see that as a barrier to applying, because if they want you, they've got ways to make it work.
It's a great tip. Thank you. Ali, anything you want to mention about the flexibility?
So yeah, we're similar setup. So it's either 40 or 60%, depending on kind of what level you're working at the moment, but it may go to 60%. So there are chances it will increase. In terms of our hub locations, we're probably a little more strict in terms of there's not a distance you have to live, but there is an expectation that you would work your 40% or 60% within one of the hub locations that's been advertised over that period of a month or so. But you certainly don't need to live like next door to it or anything else. As long as you can get in a couple of times a week, then it's absolutely fine. So flexibility is really good. It's certainly a bit parts of the role that kind of works well for most of our BAs. I think having a bit of that face-to-face time, as well as being able to get on and get your head down and do work at home as well with your cats.
So we've already mentioned there some of the preconceptions that people have about what it might be like to work in the civil service. What do you notice as some of the challenges that people move from the private sector into civil service, or vice versa? What have you noticed, either for yourself or some of your colleagues? Ian, do you want to start us off with that?
The size. I think people don't expect government to be as big as it is. I think you come in to join your team, what you've realised is it's like a TARDIS. It's absolutely enormous. Your area of responsibility, your stakeholders, your peers, your colleagues. And you go to somewhere like DWP, it's absolutely vast. The BA network there is enormous. I don't want to keep speaking for you, Ali, sorry. But that size and that huge network of people is also brilliant. I think people don't also understand that it's very much a culture. It's a working relationship. We support each other. We learn from each other. You're there for a bad day, a good day, whatever sort of day you're having. So I think people just don't understand what government work is like. We're not all pinstripe suits and bowler hats anymore. With Converse and Post-it notes and all that other stuff that goes with it. We're just as cool as everybody else. It's just we work in the hundreds of thousands of people, of users at any one time.
Yeah, I'm thinking about getting that on a t-shirt, Ian. Business Analysts, we're just as cool as everyone else.
Yeah.
Ali, what have you noticed as some of the challenges people moving between private sector organisations and the civil service?
Yeah, I'd echo what Ian had said about the size. I think sometimes it's just a really, really steep learning curve to get kind of some of the knowledge of, certainly if you're working in an area with some quite complex benefits, trying to get that knowledge in a short time can be quite challenging. So there's a lot of people who can help. There's so many people who've been around for longer periods of time and who've got that expertise who can certainly help with that. And the thing that I found a challenge is why use one acronym when you can use 5 acronyms that all have the same purpose but all in different things. So as long as you can deal with acronyms, you're fine in government. Yeah.
And you mentioned things like the pace and also potential sometimes for some people might get frustrated. What did you have in mind when you mentioned those areas?
Sorry, is that me again?
Yes.
Yeah. So I guess it depends what you're kind of used to in your setup. So I'd worked in banking prior to coming into government, and I think there are things that you can do within some of the private sector organisations that you can't necessarily do in public sector. So if somebody is doing really well and you want to promote them, you can sometimes just do that within private sector. Public sector, it's a whole different ball game. And then sometimes you can be waiting for further information on a piece of legislation or something that's changed that can seem to drag in government, whereas in private sector decisions are often can be seen to be quicker. I wouldn't say that's the same all the time, and those are just maybe a couple of extremes. But yeah, there are obviously challenges, but I think that's the same anywhere really.
I think that's a great point, and I've certainly worked with people that have come from very bonus-driven private sector organisations that find that a really strange thing when they work for an organisation then that doesn't have bonuses, because that's used as such as a way of incentivising people and rewarding good work. If you strip that out, some people feel like quite bereft, and they feel that that's like a big aspect of their working lives that is missing. So yeah, good points there. Thank you. We've mentioned the different size of some government departments. How do you create that feeling of community with business analysts when you have got so many people across the profession, across the department? Rosie, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so I think the word that comes to mind is kind of layers. So we'll have kind of a more local community, and then built on top of that, we'll have kind of a wider community, and then on top of that, there'll be an even wider one. And I think it's all about having that consistent communication. So not that you need to speak to each other every day or every week, but having that dedicated time where you can meet. So for example, within our specific portfolio, we'll have kind of like a fortnightly meeting. Within the departmental community, there'll be a monthly one, and then, you know, wider again. And away days as well, I think, are super important. So, you know, having that time away from your role to kind of connect with like-minded people, and trying where you can to network across government as well, because within departments, like Ian said, they are humongous. Like I've worked in the Home Office for quite a while now, and I will stumble across a BA that I've never spoken to before, and I'll be like, wow, you know, I thought I knew everyone, but I really don't. So, you know, we're in the hundreds. So I think it's just about kind of always being open to that work and making sure that you actively participate in it, not just saying that you're part of it and you're a bit more of a passive member. You really need to be kind of immersed in the experience.
That's great, thank you. Ian, anything that you feel that you're doing to create that sense of community with your business analyst colleagues?
We've got a really good lead network. So we've got soon to be 5 lead BAs, and they're trusted and empowered to lead their respective communities as they feel they need to. We recognise that there's 5 or 6 agencies within MOJ that they represent, and they work very differently. You know, from a technology services to a digital function, you know, the skills applied are very different, and we trust our leads to run their communities as they need. But we make ourselves visible. We're available. I'm certainly only at the end of a Slack message or a Teams message. So it very much is a small team in a big organisation. And we try and make sure that people know that there is always someone to speak to, whether it's to advise, whether it's just to have a bit of a vent. You know, that there's no hierarchical leadership structure you've got to vent off to. Just pick up the phone and have a go at someone if you need to.
Amazing, thank you. And Ali, what are you doing in DWP to create those communities?
Yeah, so we've probably got about 280 odd BAs, so it's quite vast across all of our different locations. So we do make use of things like Teams channels, specific channels for different things like Q&A channels. People can ask questions where they know it's a safe space, that there are only other BAs who are going to be looking at their questions and answering them. So we find things like that work really well. And then trying, because it's very difficult to get all of us together in one place at one time. So trying to think about what are the best uses of time and best groups to get together. So we'll have a day that's purely for the apprentices, or we'll have a day that's purely for some of the senior leaders to focus on some of their challenges. So trying to think of ways to kind of make useful contacts where people can share experience, but in the knowledge that we can't always have everybody together all of the time, as wonderful as it might be. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point about kind of thinking about those cohorts, different things that people have in common. Are they leaders? Are they apprentices? And creating those communities within a community. Now, there's a couple of questions from the chat which are kind of related that I want to pick up on. The first is, what's the level of retention like in your departments? Do you have high levels of turnover, or are you retaining staff quite well? And what's the impact of losing people to other government departments? How often does that happen? Ian, do you want to start?
So retention, I'm at 0% for the last 2 years, I think. So I've not lost anybody, to my knowledge. Oh, sorry, no, lost two people. But we've recruited about 70, so it's about 0%.
Wow.
So we have a pretty high retention rate, but what helps there is we like people to have honest conversations with their managers or their leads, and move around if they need to. When we recruit, we make sure that every recruitment campaign, we expect internal people to be also promoted within those campaigns. So it is quite fresh on teams quite often. The impact of losing people to other government departments, it can be frustrating. It swings and roundabouts because they lose them to us then. The key thing to remember, and I'm sure Rosie and Ali will say the same, you want your department to be well thought of. So if somebody's going to another government department, you want kind of Ministry of Justice to be like a mark of quality. The BA's gone there, they've come from Ministry of Justice, they're going to be quite good. That would be the hope. But just similarly, we've had people from DWP, from the Home Office, from HMRC, and they've all been very strong. So it's when.
Yeah, that's a great point, that we never want people to leave our teams on bad terms, and we want them to go out there and be ambassadors of wherever they've worked before. That's a great point. Rosie, anything you want to add?
Yeah, definitely. So I think that the retention within the Home Office is, again, quite strong. I don't think we see a very high turnover, particularly not within my kind of immediate area, which is quite nice. And I think it talks to the points that Ian raised around there being very strong kind of professional development plans in place, promotion opportunities, the ability to kind of move around, so people are getting the variety that they kind of need from their role within the same sort of sphere. And then in terms of kind of losing people to other government departments, I think this is, it's something that can be quite frustrating, but then I think you have to remember that we're all part of the civil service. So even though, somebody might be moving from the Home Office to DWP or vice versa, they're still part of that overall sort of government picture. So I think it's more frustrating for me when I see someone move to the private sector, which doesn't happen very often, I must say, but I find that more sad than somebody moving to another government department to just kind of continue growing on their journey over there.
In the chat, which is pointing out that teams in government often be blended, a mix of civil servants, contractors and suppliers. How does that work together? How does that impact the culture of those teams? Ali?
I think it's important that areas trying to think about the structure of their teams and kind of the makeup of them, so we're not kind of too top heavy on kind of one or the other. Certainly, the more we know about the people coming in terms of if we've got contractors coming in, the more we know about them, the better we're able to kind of help those teams gel. So certainly at the moment we're working with one supplier to make sure that they always notify us of who's coming in, so we can make sure they're involved in all of our teams chats and they have access to all of our kind of best practice templates, and are now invited along to a lot of sessions we do. So the sooner they understand kind of the ways that we generally work, the better for the teams. I think historically, if people kind of just came in and they would, if you're a contractor, you're going to use the skills that or the ways that you've always done things, that can sometimes be different or in conflict to the way the team might be working. So I think we're making a lot more progress on that. So having knowledge of who's coming and making sure that they feel included in everything we do, and making sure that we've got the right fit in terms of if we're bringing in a contract BA who's more senior to help support some of the junior staff, right? Or if we've just got a team that's all purely contractors, have we thought about kind of retaining all of that knowledge from the team? So yeah, just thinking about it in advance, I think.
Anything you want to add?
Yeah, so I think sometimes it's super important to reinforce that there's no sense of hierarchy. So kind of as we were touching on before, the people that work in government, the BAs that work in government are highly skilled and very competent. So sometimes I see BAs seeing contractors come in as a bit of a threat and a bit of a, you know, how are we going to work together? But I think it is very much just about building those trusting relationships, having those open conversations. I think that is super, super important, kind of seeing those contractors as part of the team, no matter how long they're going to be there. We need to trust and value their opinions just as much as we would trust and value the opinions of another colleague that was a permanent member of staff. And I always find that the best contractors or suppliers that I work with are the people that I forget are not civil servants. So, you know, it'll be a little blocker where I'll like talk about Privilege Day or something like that, and they'll be like, "Oh, I'm so jealous." And I'll be like, "Oh, you're a supplier," you know. And I think that's the best kind of relationship, and you can tell they've really integrated themselves into the team for the benefit of the organisation. So yeah, that's my ambition for all suppliers, is for me to forget they're even suppliers, working with them.
Amazing, and that's great for me to hear as well, because that's something we take really seriously at HERD, that we want to work in partnership with our clients who are often government departments, higher education institutions and so on. And yeah, we really want to kind of build those relationships and not be seen as something separate, and that we're really there to contribute towards those shared goals as well. So that's great to hear. Now we are getting into our last few minutes, so I'm just going to ask the panel if you've got any final reflections, any key thoughts that you want to take away, or you want people to take away from what they've heard here today. Starting with you, Ali.
Yeah, I guess just if anyone's on the call who hasn't worked in government before, who's kind of always thought of it as a kind of an alien kind of concept, kind of working in government, hopefully we've opened your eyes a little bit to actually the roles themselves very similar. There's lots of opportunities, that it is a great place to work. So yeah, I just hope that people can kind of take on board that we might be different in lots of ways, but actually it is a good place to work with a government and civil service provider.
Great, thank you. Ian.
Similar to Ali, I think if you are a BA or you're working in the private sector and you want to hear a bit more about how do we run a BA service in government, get in touch. You know, happy to talk about how do we run a BA service in Ministry of Justice across the complexity and the size of it. Or if there's anything you want to talk about, you know, happy to answer any questions offline.
Brilliant, thanks for that offer, Ian. And Rosie.
Yeah, all of the above. I think hopefully we've busted a couple of myths around kind of the pay situation and helped kind of open people's eyes to the flexibility and all of the challenge, and also the quality of business analysis, because we have some very, very strong business analysts within the government sphere. So yeah, there's lots of opportunity, and we'd love to welcome anyone who's been converted in the last hour.
Just going to end by saying a massive thank you to the panel. Thank you for answering all of the questions and for your honesty. And just really want to say to people, keep in touch with us, keep in touch with HERD via our LinkedIn. And you can also reach out to the panel via LinkedIn as well. Send us a connection request if you'd like to keep in touch. I also want to mention our newsletter. And this is not just another newsletter. We're not going to be sending it every day and spamming you. We only do that when we've got important information that we want to share. Thank you everyone who's made the time for this or who's listening back later. We really appreciate it, and there will be more events in future. Thank you again so much to the panel, and we'll see you all next time.
Thanks, Tina. Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone.